The Exodus is one of the most powerful and enduring stories of the Bible, a narrative that has shaped the identity of the Jewish people and has influenced countless cultures and religions around the world. It tells the story of the Israelites' liberation from slavery in Egypt, their arduous journey through the wilderness, and their eventual arrival at the Promised Land. This journey, filled with trials, miracles, and divine interventions, symbolizes the universal human quest for freedom, justice, and faith. The story of the Exodus begins with the Israelites living in Egypt, where they had settled during a time of famine under the protection of Joseph, one of Jacob's sons. Over the centuries, however, the Israelites multiplied and prospered, which eventually led to fear and resentment among the Egyptians. A new Pharaoh, who did not know Joseph, came to power and saw the growing Israelite population as a threat to his kingdom. In response, he enslaved the Israelites, forcing them into harsh labor to build his cities and monuments. The Israelites suffered greatly under the burden of slavery, their lives marked by cruelty and oppression. Yet, even in their suffering, they held on to their faith in the God of their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They cried out to God for deliverance, and the Bible tells us that God heard their cries and remembered his covenant with their forefathers. In response to the Israelites' suffering, God chose Moses, a Hebrew who had been raised in Pharaoh's palace, to lead his people out of Egypt. Moses' early life was marked by dramatic events. Born at a time when Pharaoh had ordered the killing of all male Hebrew infants, Moses was hidden by his mother in a basket and placed in the Nile River. Pharaoh's daughter found him and, moved by compassion, adopted him as her own. Thus, Moses grew up in the luxury of the Egyptian court and is educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. However, Moses never forgot his Hebrew roots. One day, he witnessed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave and, in a fit of rage, killed the Egyptian. Fearing for his life, Moses fled to the land of Midian, where he lived as a shepherd for many years. It was here, in the wilderness of Sinai, that God appeared to Moses in the form of a burning bush. The voice of God called Moses to return to Egypt and demand that Pharaoh let the Israelites go. Initially, Moses was reluctant. He doubted his ability to confront Pharaoh and lead an entire nation to freedom. But God assured him that he would be with him, giving him the power to perform miracles and the words to speak. Armed with these divine assurances, Moses returned to Egypt to fulfill his mission. Moses' return to Egypt set the stage for a dramatic confrontation between him and Pharaoh, a struggle that would culminate in the liberation of the Israelites. Moses and his brother Aaron went before Pharaoh and delivered God's command, "Let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh, whose heart was hardened, refused. In response, God unleashed a series of 10 devastating plagues upon Egypt, each one more severe than the last. The plagues were a direct challenge to the gods of Egypt, demonstrating the power of the God of Israel over all creation. The Nile River, the lifeblood of Egypt, was turned to blood. Frogs, lice, and swarms of insects infested the land. Livestock died, boils afflicted the people, and hailstorms destroyed crops. Darkness covered the land for 3 days. But despite the escalating severity of the plagues, Pharaoh remained obstinate, refusing to release the Israelites. Finally, God announced the 10th and most terrible plague, the death of all firstborn in Egypt. To protect the Israelites from this plague, God instructed them to sacrifice a lamb and mark their doorposts with its blood. This sign would cause the angel of death to pass over their homes, sparing their firstborn. This event, known as the Passover, became a central ritual in Jewish tradition, symbolizing God's protection and deliverance. The night of the Passover was a night of great sorrow for Egypt. Pharaoh's own son was among the dead, and in his grief, he finally relented, allowing the Israelites to leave. The Exodus had begun. The Israelites departed from Egypt with haste, taking with them their families, livestock, and possessions. But soon after their departure, Pharaoh changed his mind and pursued them with his army, intending to bring them back to slavery. The Israelites found themselves trapped between Pharaoh's forces and the Red Sea, with no apparent means of escape. It was here that one of the most famous miracles in the Bible occurred. At God's command, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the waters parted, creating a dry path for the Israelites to cross. The Egyptians pursued them into the sea, but once the Israelites had safely reached the other side, the waters returned, drowning Pharaoh's army. This miraculous event not only delivered the Israelites from their immediate danger, but also became a powerful symbol of God's saving power. Following their escape, the Israelites began a long and arduous journey through the wilderness. The journey, which should have taken a few weeks, stretched into 40 years due to the people's lack of faith and disobedience. During this time, God provided for their needs in miraculous ways, sending manna from heaven to feed them and water from rocks to quench their thirst. He also gave them the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, establishing a covenant with them and setting forth the laws by which they were to live. However, the journey was not without its challenges. The Israelites often complained about their hardships and longed for the comforts of Egypt, even though it meant returning to slavery. Their lack of faith and frequent rebellion led to many trials, including the incident of the golden calf, where they turned to idolatry while Moses was on the mountain receiving the law. Despite these setbacks, God remained faithful to his promise. He led the Israelites by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, guiding them through the wilderness and protecting them from their enemies. Finally, after 40 years, the Israelites arrived at the borders of the Promised Land, the land of Canaan, which God had promised to their ancestors. The story of the Exodus is not just a historical account. It is a narrative rich with spiritual and moral lessons. It teaches about the power of faith, the importance of obedience to God, and the value of freedom. The Exodus also serves as a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness to his promises and his willingness to intervene on behalf of his people. For the Jewish people, the Exodus is a foundational story that has shaped their identity and religious practices. The Passover, which commemorates the night of their deliverance from Egypt, is one of the most important holidays in the Jewish calendar. It is a time to remember God's mighty acts and to celebrate the freedom that he granted them. For Christians, the Exodus is also significant, as it prefigures the salvation brought by Jesus Christ. Just as the Israelites were delivered from slavery in Egypt, so too are believers delivered from the bondage of sin through the sacrifice of Christ, the Lamb of God. In a broader sense, the Exodus story resonates with people of all faiths and backgrounds who seek freedom from oppression, whether it be physical, spiritual, or psychological. It is a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of faith in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The journey of the Israelites from slavery to freedom continues to inspire and uplift, reminding us that, with faith and perseverance, we too can overcome the challenges we face and reach the promised land of our aspirations.